So my dad turned 16 on December 6th, 1941. And as most of you probably know, the next day is the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Well, not too long after that, when my dad turned 17, he decided to lie about his age and he joined the Marines. And they sent him to Guam, where he served for about a year. And his platoon was hit by a mortar shell that killed every member of his platoon except him and left him wounded. And he went home after that and didn't go back to war after that. But I'm telling you this because he was a veteran, and the fact that he was the only survivor, that wound up troubling him pretty much the rest of his life. It really did. But I didn't hear too many of his stories. He was kind of tight-lipped about what happened during those days, and I think it's because, he's a 17-year-old kid seeing stuff that really nobody should see. But I've got family members and friends who are veterans, and I've come to learn that there's a special kind of a patriotism that one has when they decide to join the military, to sign up. That's a big step. And again, it takes a special kind of sense of patriotism, I think, for that to happen. I have to say, I was pretty naive about patriotism until about 25 years ago. It was 2000. And in 2000, some of you know I'm a retired United Methodist minister. I see Barbara over here. She knows that. And just as a footnote, Chuck over here, who I've known the longest and used to be the chair of the SPRC committee at the church I was at in Boulder. So neither one of us is allowed in that building any longer, but I don't know what happened there. So anyway, it was 2000. In 2000, I was appointed to a Japanese-American United Methodist Church. My guess is most of you probably never knew something like that even existed. But here's a little piece of Colorado history I want to share with you today. It's important. So just in downtown Denver, you're probably familiar with Sakura Square. Sakura Square's got some interesting Japanese-American housing. There's a Buddhist temple there that's a Japanese Buddhist temple. But what a lot of people don't know, there's also a Christian church that's a Japanese-American congregation called Simpson United Methodist Church. So in 2000, I was appointed to be the new senior minister at the Japanese-American church. Now, normally the church would get a Japanese-American pastor to come in from California or Oregon, but nobody was available to come out. So they wound up by default hiring this big white guy who was the first Caucasian senior pastor of Simpson Japanese-American Church. I think I was also the tallest pastor they've ever had, too, over 6 feet tall. But anyway, it was a very, very wonderful experience. I had a great experience at this church. They had 2 sanctuaries. They had an English language sanctuary, which is the dominant congregation, but they also had a smaller sanctuary for Japanese immigrants who still spoke Japanese. So anyway, I served the Japanese-American congregation for 6 years, from 2000 to 2006. But the story I want to tell you is a uniquely Colorado story, and it's very appropriate for the occasion of Veterans Day. If you recall, I said earlier in my talk about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. When Pearl Harbor was bombed in December 1941, by February of the next year, the President of the United States, Mr. Roosevelt, signed an executive order 9066. And the executive order 9066 allowed state governments to round up Japanese-American people and remove them from their residence, their business, their farm, and put them in confinement of some kind. The majority of these people are Americans. They were second generation born in the United States, but because they looked Japanese, they were suspect. And so the federal government approved the rounding up of Japanese Americans. And that's in fact what happened in Oregon, Washington, California, Arizona. 120,000 Japanese Americans were rounded up and put in confinement. Technically, they'd be called concentration camps, but they prefer them to be called internment camps to reserve the term concentration camp for what happened in Germany. So all these people, they lost their businesses, they lost their homes, they lost their farms. This happened in Oregon, Washington, California, also, I believe, Arizona. But it didn't happen in Colorado. The governor of Colorado, Ralph Carr, objected. He said, we have all kinds of Japanese Americans here in Colorado that are farming and working and have businesses. They're not doing anything illegal. They're loyal Americans. We're not going to round them up in Colorado. And so Ralph Carr, our governor, decided not to round up and intern Japanese American people. Well, in response, the federal government put one of its internment camps in Colorado. Did you know that? Have you heard of Amachi? Down in Granada. So to kind of stick it to our governor, Ralph Carr, the federal government put an internment camp in southern Colorado. And so what happened during World War II, bunches of Japanese Americans from Oregon and California were put in the internment camp in our state here in Colorado, while the Japanese Americans living here in Colorado were outside the internment camp running their farms and their businesses. What a strange world that was. I mean, these internment, they had, barbed wire fences, guard towers and all. I mean, these were serious prisons. Let's call them prisons. So anyway, that happened in World War II. So Japanese Americans, 120,000 were interned. I can't remember how many thousand were here in Colorado. But the war went on, World War II went on, and the craziest thing you'll ever hear of happened. The Japanese Americans interned in these camps all over Wyoming, California, Oregon. I can't remember how many camps there were. But the war raged on, World War II. They petitioned the federal government to allow them to be soldiers and to fight in the war. 120,000 people in internment camps, Japanese Americans, petitioned the federal government to join the war effort. And it received all kinds of resistance, but finally, I think it was in 1943, the federal government, realizing they needed more soldiers, they needed to defeat the Nazi movement, they allowed for Japanese Americans to join the military. Now, there were some Japanese Americans who chose not to join the military because they were the no-no boys. They said, hey, our families are in prison, you want us to fight your war. But get this, 18,000 young men and women who were in internment camps joined the army. While their families were interned in camps, they joined the army to fight the Nazis in Germany and Italy. 18,000. The government formed a special unit for the Japanese American soldiers, and the regiment was called the 442. Anybody ever heard of the 442? Yeah, you've heard of the 442. The 442 was a specific and unique Japanese American regiment that fought in Germany and Italy. And they were so determined to show their loyalty to their country, most of whom were born in our country, were Native Americans. They were so determined that the 442 regiment, this is a historic piece of information for Colorado, was the most highly decorated military unit in World War II. They received more medals for valor, for honor, for heroism than any other regiment during World War II. While their families are back in the United States in internment camps, they were in Germany and Italy fighting Nazis. That's part of our history here in Colorado. Every Memorial Day, there's a gathering at the Fairmont Cemetery in Denver. There's this beautiful monument, a veterans memorial, World War II memorial, with the names of soldiers who were killed during the war, but also as veterans died, their names, World War II veterans, their names are added to the memorial. But it's become this Memorial Day event honoring not just those who've died, but all veterans, including those who were in Vietnam and Korea and Afghanistan and Iraq and all the numerous, and the intelligence service. There was a man in my church when I was at Simpson who was a translator. During World War II, he translated the Japanese messages into English. That was his job. So anyway, if you go there on Memorial Day, you'll see a bunch of people, but a lot of them are Japanese Americans who are remembering and honoring that period of time. But here's another very interesting thing. Not far away, walking distance, is Ralph Carr's grave. It's in Fairmont Cemetery, not too far from the Japanese American Memorial. Unassuming, he was governor, but totally, probably 4 feet tall, maybe 3 feet wide, under some trees. And when you go there on the Memorial Day the Memorial Day for all Americans, but if you go to that event on Memorial Day at Fairmont, if you walk over to Ralph Carr's grave, it's covered in flowers. Covered in flowers. He's still honored for taking the stand he took. So I guess I would end by saying this. It's an interesting story. It's a Colorado story about people who believed in America when America didn't believe in them. That's a special kind of patriotism.